It's the real news. I'm Aaron Mate. In recent weeks, people around the world have learned of Palestinian resilience through the plight of the Tamimi family in the occupied West Bank. For years, the Tamimis have led protests against the Israeli occupation and theft of Palestinian land. Then last month, 16-year-old Ahed Tamimi became a global symbol of resistance when she was arrested for slapping an Israeli soldier who was trespassing on her property. Just earlier, Ahed's cousin, Mohammed Tamimi, was shot in the face, leaving him in a coma. Ahed remains in an Israeli military prison and is charged with multiple counts of assault. Then last week, Israeli forces shot dead Ahed's 17-year-old cousin, Mossab Tamimi, at a protest in the West Bank. As he was laid to rest just before, Israel released another cousin, Noor Tamimi, on bail. Joining me now is Manal Tamimi. She was also arrested last week at a protest calling for her relatives' release. Welcome, Manal. Thank you so much for joining us. It's hard to know where to start given how much has happened to your family. But let's start with your own case. You were arrested at a protest calling for the release of Ahed, Noor, and Ahed's mother. What happened to you?
Um, First, I would like to, I want to thank you for giving me the chance to talk about what's really going on with our family and in the village. Actually, what happened that we decide to make women protest first in solidarity with Ahd and Naiman because they had the trial in Ofar prison, which is the only Israeli prison in the West Bank. And then also with the solidarity with the female prisoners in the Israeli prisons. After nearly 2 or 3 minutes of beginning the protest, actually we were still gathering, and suddenly they began to shoot tear gas at us. And one of the soldiers, she came to me and she asked me to go back. When I refused, she immediately arrested me without any justification or without even warning. And then they charged me that I tried to I attacked this soldier and I was organizing illegal activity in a closed military zone.
And what happened to you after you were taken to prison, after you were arrested?
After when she took me back to our prison and we were away from the media and the cameras, she began to beat me and I had bleeding in the jaw that I all the time in the prison I was very sick and I was under extreme pain. Then they took me to interrogation where they kept me the whole night until 12:30 at night outside in cold. They took me inside for interrogation. Then they took me back, keep me outside in the cold, and without food, without the water, without anything. And by the end of the interrogation, they sent me to Hasharon prison where Nariman, Noor, and Ahd are there. I reached the prison around 4 in the morning and then after that the trials began. I had two trials. I have to go back to Ofar prison, which is around 3 hours from Hasharon. Hasharon, it's in Netanya in inside occupied 48, and the Ofar is in West Bank in the Ramallah area, which of course just going to the from one prison to another it's a torture itself because they put you in a bus made of cells, metal with metal chairs. You can't move or without this cells is very small that you can't move and it's black without windows or anything, and took us from Hasharon at 2:30 in the morning, and we were back at 12 at night. And the next day it's the same. At 2:30 in the morning, we have to leave to the court and go back at 12. So it's exhausted. And in the same time, they in this buses during the taking us to the court, they put us with the Israeli criminals, men, not women, in the same place. So this is also where terrifying because most of them are where one of them he was drunk and all he was high. I think he had drugs or something, and he all the time he was trying to attack us, and it was so scary, and all the time we were terrified that one of them gonna attack us.
And as you were released, your cousin Masab Tamimi, he was shot dead in the occupied West Bank at a protest. He was 17 years old.
Yeah,
If I have this
yeah.
right, if I have this correct, he is the third member of your family to be killed by Israeli forces. Can you tell us about him, and were you able to go to his funeral?
Actually, Musad, he was killed while I was in prison. I was back uh, from the prison clinic because I was very sick. And we were watching TV, and suddenly I saw him on the TV saying that Musab Tamimi, he was shot, killed. Of course, this is one of the most difficult experiences anybody could go through to see your cousin and his blood on TV while you don't understand what's going on and what's happening, and you will think about the others, what happened with him. So then I was at night. I was released, and Musad, he was an active young man. He has many dreams want to come true. He wanted to study. He was so clever. He was this kind of person who loved life to the end, and always he was. They used to live in Jordan, and they just came back to Palestine a few months ago. So he was so happy that finally he's in his country, in among his family, with his people, and but a sniper he shot him, and it was clear that it's assassination. It's not a random shooting. By the way, the bullet went in his neck. Of course, it's one of the difficult times we are facing with the attack, the arrest of the women, the attack at the village. But Musab, he's the third member of my family who's killed during the nonviolent resistance that we began in 2009. But actually, 22 Tamimi has been killed during the since 1976 until now during the resisting the occupation.
Manal, can you tell us about that? These protests that your family has been involved in for years now against the Israeli theft of your land and water sources. This is not something that began recently, and this is something that goes on a weekly basis. Can you just explain to us, for people who aren't familiar with what your family has done to defend your land in the occupied territories?
Actually, we are resisting since the beginning of occupation, but our organized resistance, it began in the 9th of December 2009 after we lost uh, two-thirds of the village land due to the settlement expansion. The settlement, it's called Halmish, and it's been built in 1976 after the settler took over a British police station since the British Mandate. And since that time, they began to expand the settlement and they began to steal land under different justification, either the natural expansion for the settlement or for declaring a state land or a closed military zone. So every time they change the excuse, but always it's about the shifting of the land. So in 2009, when they took the spring, we decided that we have to begin our non-violent organized protest in the village. What we mainly wanted to do is to march toward the spring and calculate the ants there, planting new trees and just to ensure that this is a Palestinian land, not settled. But the Israeli response were very, very violent. They began to use different kinds of tear gas which contain white phosphor, nerve gas, and other chemical substances. They began to use live ammunition, steel-coated bullets, the same kind that they shot Muhammad the day they 2 weeks ago, and he was so lucky that he survived. Also, skunk water, which is chemical substance mixed with water with a very bad smell, like dead animals smell, and they try to pollute our waters, uh, the water tanks on the rooftops because we already have problems with water. We only have 12 hours a week water. Uh, since 2009 until now, the village counted 650 residents. 550 of them have been injured, uh, and 215 have been arrested, including 44 child and 10 women. We have 12 demolition orders and also 38 houses partially burned of gas canister. So all this or this collective punishment for the village just because of the choice of non-violent resistance. Just people who trying to uh, uh, march or express their opinion peacefully, children, men, women. So there's no need for such a force to stop us. Of course, the worst thing about this that we had to lose, we lost Rushdie who was 30 years old and he has a 3 years old daughter. Mustafa, who was 28 years old, and recently Mus'ab, who is 17, and another guy who was 18. He's from a nearby village, but he was shot killed in the village during one of the protests.
And Mohammed, your 15-year-old cousin, as you say, almost lost his life, was left in a coma. And let's hear
Yeah.
from him. He recently spoke to the Israeli newspaper Haaretz in a video, and he told his story of what happened.
When we got to the villa, I stood up on the wall and I didn't know that the army was there. I didn't see a single soldier. And then the soldier shot me and I lost consciousness. They took us to Beit Rama hospital nearby. They didn't know what to do with me and they didn't do anything. So they took me to a hospital in Ramallah where they operated on me for 6 hours. I didn't get up for a week afterwards because of the pain in my head. Because of what happened to my head, I can't leave my house for 6 months for school or to go into town. This is because I don't have a skull here in my head.
So that's 15-year-old Mohammed Tamimi telling his story of what happened to him. Now, it was after he was shot in the face and left in a coma that Ahed Tamimi heard this news, was distraught, and when an Israeli soldier trespassed on her property, that's when she was seen slapping him. But now let me ask you, you're describing these years of nonviolent Palestinian resistance that your family's been involved in. And here in the West, we're supposed to revere nonviolence. We hear often about questions of Palestinians. Why aren't Palestinians nonviolent? But the reaction to Ahed Tamimi and your family has not been overwhelmingly positive. I mean, even for those who acknowledge what happened, we get headlines like this. So I want to read you a couple of headlines from US media, okay? The first one is from CNN, and it says, Ahed Tamimi, Palestinian heroine or dedicated troublemaker, okay? And the next one from Newsweek says, this is Newsweek, and it says, despite her age, Ahed Tamimi has a long history of assault against police and soldiers. So, Manal, I'm just wondering your reaction when you hear that. When you hear that that's how some Western media outlets are portraying your family, your thoughts?
Uh, First, I feel sorry that this media, it's obviously that they are brainwashed and they are adopting the Israeli story, and if they're not preparing or they didn't ask what's really happening. Uh, she never went to a settlement to threatening settlers' life. She never went to inside 48 to try to bomb herself, or all the incidents or all the videos that you saw for most of it or all of it's in the village, and it's in the front of her house, it's in her properties, or in her relatives. So actually, they are the one who's storming the village, threatening our lives, put our children's lives in danger, and they want us just to say hi for them or just to keep silent without doing anything, which is impossible. Anybody in the world, any person who feels that his children in danger, or he feels that he gonna lose one of his family members, his normal reaction will be the same reaction that I did. She didn't do anything. All of us, we thought that Muhammad, he died and he lost his life. And it's one of the most difficult moments after the death of Rushdie and Mustafa. And we saw them dying in front of us. The whole village saw them dying. And with everything, or with all the force that the Israeli authorities using against us, it's very difficult to think that we're gonna lose another member of the family. So it was a very normal reaction. And by the end, she's a child. She's not. She's still a teenager, and she shouldn't be treated this way. Uh, Israel, they use, or in the West Bank, we are laying under the military law that they can, and they legitimize arresting children from 11 years up, and they can put them in jail for life. For and there is another law that they can put children for up to 20 years for throwing rocks only. In the time that the Israeli or the settler child was living in the same area around only 500 meters from us, they are allowed to throw rocks, they are allowed to threatening our lives, and they will be treated under the civilian law. This is not a democratic state. It will never be. It's not democratic to treat two children in the same place differently. One to call him a terrorist, a criminal, and the other one to call him a victim. Uh, so I hope that uh, people, they won't listen to this media, and they can go to search. They can Google Nabi Saleh or Google Tamimi, and they will see, or they can go to YouTube, to Bilal Tamimi channel on YouTube, and they can see the horrible life we are living and what we have to face under occupation, just because we took the decision to stay in our land and to fight for our rights.
Manal Tamimi, we have to leave it there. We thank you so much for joining us.
You're so welcome, and thank you again for giving me this chance.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for joining us on The Real News.